Max Verstappen took pole position for the Italian Grand Prix ahead of the McLarens of Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri, and he described it as big, and that's because of last year's disaster for Red Bull at Monza. So, John Noble, why were Red Bull terrible here last year and have managed to make enough progress, even though they're not overall where they want to be on pole 12 months later?
Part of the answer falls into the kind of the reason why they were so terrible last year. That they came here as a difficult weekend. Max Verstappen qualified 7th, finished 6th on Sunday, but it was a very poor weekend for them. It was a weekend that highlighted problems on the car. They basically found that there was a kind of extreme balance shift. It was something Max Verstappen had picked up on telemetry data. That basically once the downforce comes off the car, it highlighted a weakness, again, the concept of the car. And they took away the lessons of that weekend and they kind of applied it to their focus this weekend. And it was quite interesting. Last weekend in Zandvoort, we had Paul Monaghan, their chief race engineer. We talked about the key thing now, the success of this car isn't about opening up a setup window and have a car that's very wide. It's actually, he called it reducing the balance window, which basically means that you shift this aero balance. You no longer have huge oversteer on the way into corners, and huge understeer on the way out. It's very consistent. And I think that's what's unlocked an awful lot of pace today and a well-executed qualifying from Red Bull.
Yeah, Max Verstappen talked about the fact that he had confidence to attack the corners. He had the rotation mid-corner when he needed it, which he didn't always have last year, whereas last year it was basically either you had to have so much instability at turn in, it was undrivable, or you had to engineer in some mid-corner understeer, basically. But also, because they had a little bit of extra rear wing on last year to deal with that problem, they couldn't trim it out properly. They could trim it out this time. But interestingly, Max Verstappen did have a toe from Yuki Tsunoda on his first run, but he didn't have a toe really on his second run, maybe the merest hint of a toe from Lando Norris. So this isn't just a Monza slipstream special, is it?
No, I think all teams are trying to maximise that slipstream effect, which is small, 0.1, 0.2 max, but still important. But you also do lose time in the corner, something the dirty air of these cars isn't great. And I think the game today basically was to try not to get trapped at the back of the field, because then you get stuck in a long queue on the pit exit, the tyres cool down. That's not very good. The first run, it just shuffled out. Yuki got ahead of Max and helped him on that first run. But that second run, they went away. Yuki had the bad luck to be at the front of the train, derailed his efforts. But from Max's perspective, I think it was just behind Norris. I think it works quite well for him. But he just nailed the lap, just pulls the best out of it. I spoke to Laura Meckes, the team principal afterwards. They said this was a day when maybe 5-6 drivers could have been on pole position, but they nailed every aspect.
Now, of course, the big question people will be asking is, can Max Verstappen win tomorrow? What's interesting, in the press conference, I asked Max about the improvement in terms of wanting to get a little bit more of how much has changed in the car. But he went pretty much straight to a word of caution, which was about the race pace, because he points to Zandvoort. He said, we were pretty good on a single lap, not good on race pace. And that's what he's worried about. He said we need to understand why we keep having this problem. So although we're talking about how much Red Bull has gained over 12 months, there's still big question marks over this car, and there's still limitations. And he's not entirely confident about the race pace tomorrow, even though it looked pretty good on Friday.
Yeah, I think today was a perfectly executed, maximised for opportunities. But there are lots of factors which I'm sure we'll come into that why McLaren aren't as dominant here as they've been previous races and at other venues. But it does shift tomorrow. The characteristics of where Red Bull's advantage today is some of that will be wiped away tomorrow. It's about tyre kind of thermal degradation here again, rather than a wear issue, which again favours McLaren. So there's a lot speaking for McLaren, but the question is, can Max hold on in front? It's not easy to overtake.
It's only going to be a one-stopper tomorrow as well. There's no real chance of strategic variation, except for people down the grid, or maybe if something weird happens to interrupt him. But the normal run of things are one-stopper. But McLaren. Now, McLaren have been very strong everywhere. And so I guess it stands to reason if you've got a car that's globally very good, on an outlier track like this, it can put you into a place where you don't have the advantage that you've enjoyed before. So what have McLaren been saying?
Yeah, this is interesting. So, we all know that this is a different downforce level. But even so, you would think a car that's been in an absolute class of its own in Zandvoort last weekend and a class of its own in Budapest in the race, why does it suddenly fall back into pack here and be exposed? So I asked Andrea Stella this, and he gave a very thorough, detailed explanation. Basically boils down to the McLaren's core advantage is in corners. And if you go to the GPS braces, you can see that, corner exits, the McLaren has that advantage. But there's short corners here, and there's only effectively 6 of them. So if you're better in the corners and you're worse on the straights, your advantage is instantly wiped away. But he also says the McLaren's pitched for its maximum efficiency at higher downforce levels. So when the wing comes off, its efficiency isn't as good. And then that falls into range where the Red Bull efficiency is actually better than the McLaren. He thinks that this level of downforce, like we saw potentially in Spa as well, the McLaren, the Red Bull, sorry, is actually the best car at these downforce levels. So these are all the factors, and it's been further exacerbated by the fact that the track grip is so high this year. It was resurfaced last year, it's weathered in, it's gripped up. We've had the fastest F1 lap in history today, beat Lewis Hamilton's pole position time by 2020. And that also means, because the grip levels are high, you're braking later, you're accelerating earlier, the corners are even shorter. Andrea Stella said today is going to get us the kind of percentage of full throttle versus cornering time around the lap later for us, just so we can clearly understand that. But he says it shifts tomorrow. The corners get longer because the cars are heavier, the tyres are degraded. So again, it shifts things slightly away from Red Bull back towards McLaren.
Absolutely. And I think McLaren will be strong in the race tomorrow as well. And Red Bull, Verstappen should be. He's worried, but you'd like to think that'll be a factor. Now, people will be wondering what happened to Ferrari. Charles Leclerc was 4th. Lewis Hamilton was 5th, fastest, but has that 5-place grid penalty from Zandvoort. So Leclerc said he felt he maximised the car. So why wasn't Ferrari quite able to really pitch for pole?
I think, as Laura Mecca said, a lot of drivers were in contention there, but executing your tyre preparation, the cleanliness of your lap and your toe, Ferrari didn't quite nail it properly. But one of the big questions, of course, and we discussed this last night, and I even talked about this with Professor yesterday, was the slipstream. You know, with Ferrari, knowing that Lewis got grid penalty, Lewis Hamilton as a front gunner, so to speak, to pull Charles Leclerc along, even if it was worth 0.1 seconds, it's still quite valuable when it comes to that point the pole position, point the grid positions.
2/10 off Leclerc. Yeah.
So you can argue, should they have done it? Charles was asked this in the pen tonight. He kind of played it down a bit, said, half hinted, we talked about it, but we didn't do it. Then was asked, so you did discuss it? And he went, well, not really, but maybe something we need to discuss now. So I think teams were juggling whether or not what was better to do. Tyre preparation, nailing your outlaps, finding the perfect area for slipstream, or do you play games and try to get one car to tow another? I think there's this constant juggle. The danger here is if you misjudge your exit, you either end up at the front of the train and it's a disaster, as Yuki Tsunoda found, or you end up at the back and your tyres are out the window. So I think you're juggling so many compromises that, and I'm sure if we reran qualifying, there's a very different one.
Absolutely, yeah. There's lots of circumstantial elements. And frankly, while the ultimate would be optimise the tyre prep and get the toe perfect, that's very, very difficult to do. So you want to lean on the car pace and executing well, and that's what Max Verstappen did. So I guess we should briefly throw a word in for Williams, the big disappointment. They look very quick. They are quick, but not on that key lap on fresh softs.
Yeah, I think, again, they were another team that were kind of juggling. They've been juggling this tyre prep issue mostly. Their car's got a very narrow window. The tyres are in the right window. This is why the prep lap for them has been absolutely essential. They've been trapped behind Racing Bulls in the past. There's a Constructors' Championship fight going on. So I think they were juggling. They knew the car was quick. They just didn't quite nail it. They had some scrappy laps. There were track limit problems, lockups, running wides. Didn't quite click up today. So I think they'll be disappointed that things weren't as optimized, didn't look as great as they were on Friday. But this is qualifying. It's so hard to judge your position, your pit lane exit, manage your tyre temperatures. And it's a constant juggling game where you need to react quickly. And you're not a complete master of your destiny. Because if you misjudge your pit exit by 1 second, it'll be 5-6 cars ahead of you and you're completely in the wrong window.
But should be 2 cars to watch tomorrow in the race because they're very, very quick in steady state stint running. So that'll be an interesting subplot. But the big one at the front, Verstappen there with the 2 title protagonists, Lando Norris, who will feel he needs to beat Piastri, is ahead. What kind of race are you expecting?
I think it will be an intriguing one, primarily because it is a one-stop. So there's only one opportunity. There's not really an alternative strategy that anybody can do. Key thing will be, can one of them get ahead of Max Verstappen on the first lap? Because if you can break free from the other who's trapped behind the Red Bull, that can make a difference. So I think it's going to be a very fascinating opening lap. Both drivers will be well aware that if the positions after the first lap could well be set prior to the first pit stops. So as we saw 12 months ago there, how they come out the second chicane could be defining. It's how they go into that first or second chicane that could be where the excitement is.
Exactly. And as you say, remember Piastri on Norris last year on the first lap.